All right, seems like it's time to begin. Excellent. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us on our May version of the Friends Heritage Worth Heritage Worth Preserving meeting. We want to make sure that everybody gets to participate. So if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to use the chat in Teams to do that. We have people here who will monitor those questions and make sure that they get answered by the group. Well, the topic this evening is the history and current status of Denver Rio Grande Western number 223. We've got John Bush and Jeff Taylor here. We're expecting Jimmy Booth soon. I just want to mention that if I'm looking over here, it's only because that's where my notes are. We also have with us Tom Stewart and Kathleen Walzer. Thank you for being here. They're the support team today. And I want to mention that the Friends currently have a work session in the CRF in Antonito, and the group there for, I think we're in session B right now, are watching us on the TV in the CRF. So I wanted to give a shout out to everybody there. I got a chance to visit with everyone in Antonito today, and it's just a great facility. So if you don't mind, John and Jeff, why don't you guys introduce yourselves, please?
Well, I'm John Bush, and I've been involved with the 223 since 1985, maybe 1986. When it was sitting behind Union Station in Salt Lake, or the Rio Grande Station, actually, Rio Grande Station in Salt Lake. And I went through on a Rio Grande Zephyr. Actually, at the time, I think it was still a California Zephyr. No, it was Rio Grande Zephyr. And saw it sitting there, and the end sill of the tender was on the ground behind it. I had just the year before finished the 168 cosmetic restoration in Colorado Springs and was kind of looking for something to do. So after that, of course, I went on. I had been working for the Georgetown Loop, and then I went on and worked for a while at the Valley Railroad in Connecticut. And then I worked on the Marcia, David Moffat's private Pullman car, which was in Craig, Colorado, and had been in a fire. And I worked on the Cowhea and Zacatecas number 12, which was at Palmer Lake, which they wanted to make it look like it had belonged to the Rio Grande. And then at the end of working on the Marcia, I got called to come to Chama and become chief mechanical officer. I did that from the fall of 89 to the spring of 96. And then I went to Alaska and was superintendent of the White Pass and Yukon Railroad. And from there, I went to the Great Smoky Mountains Railroad for a little while. That was not a good fit. So I went to the Roaring Camp Railroad in California and was there until I got called back to the CNTS as president in January of 2013. And I did that till the end of 2020. And since then, done some consulting and have taken some groups to Europe, ride trains in Switzerland, among other things. And in between those things, I think I've slept a few times.
Jeff, you want to give an introduction, please?
Yeah. First thing, though, is Jimmy's trying to log on. He just sent us a message saying he can't make the link work for some reason.
Okay.
He wants to join.
Tom or Kathleen, can you send him another link, please?
Let me just message Jimmy here.
Okay, no problem.
Oh, I might add
While you're
that now
doing that,
my wife and I do run a bed and breakfast in Chama.
Yes, you do. A very nice bed and breakfast.
The Victorian.
One that I have spent a lot of time at. John, I didn't realize your relationship with the 223 went back so far. That's 31 years, if my math is correct.
Yeah, that's about right.
That's cool.
That's about right.
That's cool. Jeff?
Well, I've been involved since last year with 223. This is all other than buying this hat back in 2011 because I thought it looked cool and wanted to support the group at the time. But I've been in the preservation industry for steam railroading stuff almost 20 years. I started back in 2007 at Knott's Berry Farm, and I was an engineer fireman. Worked there for 7 years, and we did everything. We did track work, we ran the trains, we did maintenance, we helped in the shop occasionally. And then went to Durango in 2015, worked at the Durango and Silverton car shop for almost 2 years, and got offered the job at the museum as a assistant curator of equipment and rolling stock. And my predecessor moved on, and I took over, and it'll be 10 years at the museum in September. But in between all that stuff, I have, a vast knowledge of C-class locomotives, mainly working with the C-19s, especially the two at Knott's Berry Farm, and now with the 346 at the museum. I also helped out. I was one of the longtime early volunteers with Southern Pacific Narrow Gauge 18 out in the Owens Valley. I was there for almost every work session from 2010 up until I moved out of California in 2015. And of course, the main reason why I took the job at the museum in 2017 was to finish the 220 or finish the 20. RGS 20 was a project that I was told would be mine to finish and take over. And how do I say no to that? So that's the main reason why I took the job at the museum, and I've been there ever since. And obviously, we've toured the 20 now twice, and we'll do more touring of locomotives in the future.
That's a subject we're going to come back to because that's very exciting. You're not going to remember this, Jeff, but when in your time at the Knott's, I messaged you, just some random Joe off the street, and said, "Hey, I'm going to be in SoCal. Can I get a tour?" And your generosity of your time and knowledge was incredible. I want to thank you for that. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, you're welcome. Lots of folks would reach out to me, and I would try to go out of my way, especially when I could, to show people around. And it was always we all did. We always had a lot of fun when somebody who truly liked narrow gauge and wanted to see the stuff, and we'd go take them, tour through the parlor car Durango or the business car Edna, or if we had time, take them back to the shop or get a cab ride or something like that.
Little piece of Colorado in Southern California.
That's right.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, let's start talking about C-16s, I think. My understanding is that Kathleen's working with Jimmy on getting connected, so hopefully he'll be here soon. So the first question I have is I was doing some very, very light research, and it seems like I saw online 4 different numbers for the number of C-16s that were built, and that's a little confusing. I don't know if it's because some went to the Rio Grande, some went to back then there was the Denver Rio Grande, and then there was the Rio Grande Western. So I don't know if the numbers are getting confused because they didn't all go to one or the other. Does anybody know off the top of their head how many of these things were actually built?
My understanding is that there were 82 Class 60 locomotives built. Now, there were Class 56 locomotives, look almost identical, but are just slightly smaller. They were all supposed to be built, the way I understand it, Baldwin, but Baldwin did not have the ability to do them all in the time frame that the Rio Grande wanted. And so 28 of them got built by Grant, the 200 through the 227.
Okay. So there
Jeff,
were
that
80.
squares with your understanding?
As far as I know, but I've seen the same thing where you see a couple different numbers here and there. Yeah, it should be. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. The Class 60, if I understand correctly, denotes the thousands of pounds of weight on the driving wheels.
Yes. It's
Okay.
weight of the locomotive, roughly 60,000 pounds.
Okay. So a C16 is 30 tons.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And then at some point, the Rio Grande went through a reclassification and they came up with the new numbering system. They became C16, C for consolidation and 16 for 16,000 pounds of tractive effort. Is that right?
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
Approximately.
Oh,
Yeah, they
yeah.
rounded up or
Approximately
down
16,000.
depending on the engine.
Yeah. And
Okay.
the reason that was valuable is that what a locomotive weighs is, when you're building trains, is not as important as how much it'll pull.
That makes sense. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. So when
Well,
you're coming up with a list of locos and what they can pull up a certain grade, let's say Cumbre, from Jama to Cumbre Pass, you don't really care what they weigh necessarily. You care how much they can pull.
Right. Now, there is an interesting thing, and Jeff, you can probably speak to this more, but the C19s are actually probably not as efficient on the rail as the C18s, because the C19s were connected on the second driver and the C18s were connected on the third driver,
right.
which meant that there was less angular momentum to deal with the longer main rod, which made them effectively better pullers,
Interesting.
even though their tractive effort is a combination calculation. And I don't remember exactly how the formula goes together. Jeff, do you?
Well, for tractive effort, no, I don't remember the formula off the top of my head. I've used it in the past, but I'm not a math whiz, which I wish I was better at math. But your idea on the C19 tractive effort versus C18 is kind of my same theory, is that the shorter main rod and the C16s have a similar problem. Makes the engine want to rock from side to side versus C18s. And we experienced with this when we're running the 315 during Polar Express in 2025 at the museum. If you get the engine working hard, it would do this. It would sway the back end side to side. It was kind of funny. But my theory has always been that because of the short main rod, the C19s were rated lower to help them not waddle as much. And I've seen a video of 268, the Bumblebee C16, somewhere near Saponero, moving a whole long cut of stock cars, and it's rocking side to side really bad. Another theory that Scott Gibbs and I were talking about recently in regard to 315 especially is theoretically its boiler design is just a little bit more efficient and can steam better than the C19 boilers. That's also another theory at this point. We haven't proved it, but I've always had the fun thought when I worked at Knott's, like, wouldn't it be cool to take one of the C16s and go do a C16 or C19, excuse me, versus C18 at the CNTS? But you know, that may happen yet. But
Well, you make it.
we're getting off topic from C16, so
But still, that would be amazing to see.
yes.
And it's interesting that the tonnage ratings don't take into account the steaming capabilities and the you know, the thing that you're talking about where the main rod is attached to the third wheel instead of the second wheel.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into tonnage stuff, and I've got some old paperwork from the RGS from late teens, early 20s, right after they got like RGS 20, the 460s, and they talked about drag tonnage and how they were wanting to derate those engines because they couldn't keep up the timetable schedule. Like they could pull the train, but they would slow way, way, way down. So they were trying to reduce the tonnage so that they could keep up track speed. So there's all kinds of fun things that go into tonnage ratings.
Yes, there is.
Wow. That's cool. All right. So of the 82 total C16s or Class 60s that were built, my understanding is there are 3 locomotives left. There's 268 in Gunnison.
Yes.
Correct.
278 no longer on the bridge in Saponero. I think it's in the yard
Cimarron.
currently. Cimarron, sorry. But when I was there last summer, it was still on the bridge. And then 223, which I think is technically still in Provo.
It's in Ogden.
Oh, Ogden.
Sorry, Ogden. Right. So let's talk about, how of the 82 locomotives, how only 3 of them survived.
You want to talk,
Okay.
Sean? Or want to go?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
a big part of the factor has to do with the coming of the big engines, the K-28s, the K-36s, K-37s. So the railroad was very concerned with labor. And the more tonnage a locomotive could pull, the fewer locomotives they needed, which meant the fewer engineers and the fewer firemen, etc. Once they got to superheat, which the 28s, 36s were superheated, and then the 37s came out, they were superheated as well, meant that they could produce more usable heat from the same amount of coal.
Okay.
Because you didn't have to heat as much water to get as much usable steam.
The 27s came out as cold.
They started out as saturated steam,
saturated
volcane compounds, which was another way of trying to nurse a little more efficiency out of them. And then were changed to saturated steam, slide valve, simple engines with Stevenson gear. And then were changed to superheated piston valve engines, which is the last version. So as these improvements were made, smaller engines began dropping out. And they dropped out for a variety of reasons. How much miles they had, how worn out everything was, how much damage they had in wrecks.
Iron versus steel boilers?
Mostly. I don't know if all of the engines got steel boilers, if all the C16s got steel boilers, or if some of them may have dropped off when they were still wrought iron boilers. And there was also whether or not they were lap seam boilers. So all of those things were factors. And as they needed less engines, they got rid of small stuff. And there are lots of pictures on the Rio Grande Southern of a dead line of engines west of Durango. So a lot of what happens with what engines survive, the reason we have the 346 instead of the 271 is because Montezuma Lumber Company managed to scorch the crown sheet on the 271. The 346, which had been wrecked on Kenosha Pass, had been rebuilt by the CNS because they were required to do so. And so when that became available, the 271 got scrapped and Montezuma Lumber ended up with 346. So the point, though, is a lot of this stuff is just circumstance. What happened to be where at what time? So
I think Jimmy may be joining us.
I hope so.
Jimmy, how are you?
There he is. Oh, not too
Great
bad.
to see you.
Likewise.
John, I want to come back to this because there's the next point of this is one of my favorite parts of the story. But I want to introduce Jimmy Booth here real quick to everybody. Jimmy, if you don't mind, can you give a quick introduction?
Hi, my name's Jimmy Booth. Thank you for having me. I'm the president of the 223 Foundation, along with the C16 Society. We're looking forward to seeing 223 being restored, and my love and passion for narrow gauge railroading has happened since I was a child and continues to this day, and would really like to see this restoration take place.
Jimmy, you're famous in the model railroading community for your work in SN3, your work with PBL, your incredible weathering, the presentations that you do. Like, how do you go from that to restoring a full-size locomotive? I know we're jumping ahead. I apologize, but this question just popped into my head.
Part of it is, through the models, for most people, they don't have access to the real trains, real railroading. And so fortunately, living around steam most of my life, I was able to feel it and touch it and be able to have that passion that you need to be able to do something like this. And getting into the live steam hobby, I actually built my own 223 and 2.5-inch scale in hopes of one day being able to work on the real one. And so just having that continued passion for the real thing and I guess kind of like daydreaming, as it were, through the models until you can get your hands on a locomotive to restore is the end goal. At least it was for me.
That's very cool.
Jimmy, your contact with 223 goes back to when it was still in Pioneer Park. Is that right?
Yes. I used to play on it when I was a kid. My dad would go out. We'd go out to Salt Lake City on vacation once a year. And once in a while it would be open and I would mess around with it and play on it and that type of thing. I was about 12, 14 years old at the time. And I remember telling my dad, wouldn't it be cool to see this thing run? And he said, well, that'll never happen, son, but you can always dream. So we'll see if we can make that dream come true. But I've had
to prove his dad wrong.
Had a lifelong passion for 223. By coincidence, here's something by coincidence with the model thing is in both HON3, SN3, and ON3. My very first models in each one of those scales just happened to be a 223, just by coincidence. Wow. Yeah. And so when I built my first 2.5-inch scale engine, I says it has to be 223.
So in 4 different scales, your first locomotive was 223.
Yeah. Wasn't planned that way, but just happened that way.
5 if you count 1-to-1 scale.
Yeah, 1-to-1. Here we go. Be careful what you wish for.
I would say that little kid dreams can be very, very powerful motivators for the rest of your life. So that's why it's important to get kids around steam engines as early as you can.
Totally
that's
agree.
why we have Jeff. He's still a kid.
That's right.
So, John, we were talking about like how we only ended up with 3 after 82 of them were built, and what you said makes sense. Larger locomotives, more efficient locomotives, less crew meant more money for the railroads. But and I mentioned this is my favorite part of the story because there's a very specific reason why we had 4 and then 3 C16s much later than anybody who's running something that small. Does anybody want to talk about that part of the story?
I would say it's because the engines were lucky because they were in good shape. A lot of these little engines, to John's point, as the bigger engines came, the smaller engines, got shoved off to less important jobs like switchers or working a branch line like 223, 268, and 278 did. They were the ones that did the Baldwin branch for the most part. And then, of course, down after they cut off the part of the circle, they could run to Saponero and back where the big engines couldn't. As traffic fell off, they needed more of the bigger engines. And the little engines, of course, had to work a lot harder to pull the same amount of freight. So why not use one of the bigger engines? Therefore, the smaller engines were a lot more abused and a lot more wore out. And, how did they pick which one to upgrade versus which one to set aside? Well, that one just needs a boiler. Great. Put a boiler on it. Keep it running. That one needs everything. Scrap it. That's kind of the situation they get into with a lot of these locomotives. And again, luck being some cases, like John said, about the reason why we have 346 is partly because it was wrecked and rebuilt and it was in pretty decent shape. And then it was the engine to replace 271 and then the sawmill burned to the ground, and she got set aside by the scrappers. And Bob Richardson happened to find it, so we have that locomotive today. 278, 268, 223 survived because they ended up being the last ones they needed or in Gunnison, working the Baldwin branch and elsewhere around the Gunnison area. And 223, I think, was more worn down than the other two, and it was the first one picked for preservation and went to Utah. And 268, of course, became famous by being used for the railroad fair, and then got used in the movie Denver and Rio Grande, so it kind of stuck around.
Railroad fare was 49. Does that sound correct?
49, yeah.
Okay.
Well, the other part of it was the light rail, the branch to Lake City, the Baldwin branch, the stuff through the Black Canyon had relatively light rail. Now, the other place that had light rail was the RGS, but the RGS was upgraded to the point that it could handle heavier engines like the C-19s, and that's why the RGS
K-27s
set aside the C-16s and used the C-19s.
That makes sense. Okay, so there's 3 C-16s still in existence, and we can get into a little bit of the history and some of the unique things about 268 and 278. But what makes, and I'm hoping I'm sending you guys a softball because I think I know the answer to this. What makes 223 unique of the 3 surviving C-16s?
It's the only surviving Grant locomotive of the 3. And so that makes it very special in that respect. And so not only do we want to preserve a C-16, but then to be able to preserve the Grant heritage, as it were, is also showing respect to the industry that, basically built steam from the ground up.
Yep, totally agree. Totally agree.
The other thing,
please go ahead, John.
Part of the history here, of course, is the 268 and the 278 ended up in places where, in some ways, people paid more attention to them. They were closer to home rail. And so they have been kind of locked away in ways that the 223 was not. Part of the thing with the 223, of course, it turns out when it got sent to Utah, there is no real evidence that it ever operated in Utah. And so it became kind of a white elephant, I guess, by the time it got to Ogden. So it was in many ways more available to have something done with it. Trying to take either of the other 2 away from where they are and use them some other place would get more political backlash.
Yeah. Work has been done already going back, I believe, 20 years in Ogden on 223. Can we talk about what work was done and what that leaves left to be done?
Yeah.
The Golden Spike chapter started in what, 89?
I think that officially, yeah. I think that is the correct date.
It goes back quite a ways. They started a long time ago trying to do their best to do something with the locomotive. I don't know if their intent right off the bat was to make it run, but they wanted to, do some work to it because it had essentially been neglected in the park for so long.
And I think the tender had, for all intents and purposes, fallen apart, if memory serves.
Pretty much.
Yes,
that's correct.
Yeah, so they did an excellent job rebuilding the tender and the cab. They got probably 90 to 95% of the work completed on those 2 projects. And so they got really good start on those 2 items. They were in the process of basically tearing the locomotive apart bolt by bolt into individual pieces. And that's kind of where it sits now. We've done a full inventory of the locomotive, the parts, and have everything grouped together in containers and storage at the Ogden station. And we're looking forward to start making the trek to Durango with some of those items. The first items will be the tender and the cab, pilot beam, and pilot truck coming up here in June. We'll start the move there.
That's really exciting. And so I'm gonna guess then, based on what you're saying, Jimmy, that the restoration work will be done in Durango.
Yes, it will be.
Okay. Same place that's done 340, 41 from
They have
Knott's.
346 right now.
They have 346 right now.
They're firing up 340 today.
That's quite a track record. That's really impressive.
Yeah, I wanted them to get checked out on C-class engines before they started out on ours.
Yeah, there you go. Get
Smart
them
man.
some practice time.
They know how to do it now.
Well, and you know,
and
to
of
give
course,
them a
the
plug.
C19 is only just a slightly larger version of a C16.
Right.
So it really is the same stuff. Dimensions are a little different, but all the way it was put together is exactly the same.
And of course, all Baldwin. I mean, even the Grant-built locomotives, I assume, use Baldwin plans.
There were some differences as built.
Okay.
There were some differences as built. But essentially they're identical locomotives. And of course, the 223 now is what we call a fully evolved artifact. So in some ways, 223 is kind of like Grandpa's good old axe. You know,
Yes.
It had 2 new heads and 5 new handles, but still the same axe.
Right.
In that sense, I can't swear to how much of the 223 is original Patterson, New Jersey stuff, except it's sold.
We have that conversation a lot in the Friends too, with freight cars and things like that as well. Sorry, Jeff.
No, I was going to say, having seen the locomotive fairly recently and crawled all over it, I know it the tender probably got rebuilt multiple times. The cabs got replaced. The boiler was replaced in 1914. The frame was replaced at one point. I don't remember what year. John, Jimmy, you might remember. But what's interesting is a lot of it has an older cylinder saddle. So it's possible that the cylinders could be original. The 41 and 340 and RGS 20 all have newer cylinders that were cast in Denver by Stearns Rogers. Both 41 and 340s are from like 1925. 20 got a set way late, 1936. 346 did not. 223 did not. And there's one way to tell right off the bat. If you look at where the cylinder saddle attaches to the bottom of the smoke box, if it has bolts all the way around, then it's a newer cylinder saddle casting. The older ones like 223 and 346 and the 168 at the CNTS all only have bolts down the sides. So it's possible that the cylinder saddle could be original.
Wow.
I would like to crawl underneath it some more and see if there's anything identifiable, but I haven't done that yet.
I suspect that that's in your future.
Oh, yeah.
I've already been in the boiler. I'm probably the first one to go in the boiler in a long time.
Wow.
It's the downside of being so thin is I fit everywhere.
I was going to say, yes. Somebody in chat mentions that they have a copy of the C16 frame drawing made by Grant. That's pretty cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in a copy of that.
Scan it and send it to us.
Yeah, Bill, can you connect to Jeff and Jimmy and get them a copy of that, please? I will let you know if Bill responds.
Yeah, obviously, I'd love a copy as well.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and John as well.
We're trained nerds. We like looking at old drawings.
Okay, so it sounds like what needs to be done is predominantly frame and boiler and driver work. Is that accurate?
Yeah, well, basically the whole engine sans the tender.
and the cab.
So, as it stands at the moment, It's going to need at least one, maybe two axles.
Driver axles.
Driver axles. Thank you. Driver axles. It's going to need all new crank pins. One of the things that happened to it when it sat in Pioneer Park, this also happened to the 168 when it sat in the park in Colorado Springs. But the city set up sprinkler systems, and the sprinkler systems watered parts of or all of the locomotive.
Yeah.
I've always kidded that what they were trying to do was grow them into standard gauge engines by watering them, because that's what you do with plants. But the result was, particularly on the 223, water got inside all the crank pin bits, the side rods and the main rod. And those are just trashed, just completely trashed. And so it'll need all new crank pins on both sides. The cylinder on the engineer's side has some repaired cracks that'll need to be repaired again, and it'll probably end up getting sleeved both sides. It'll also need new steam delivery pipes, what we call the wishbones, that take the steam from the dry pipe down to the steam chests. Those will need to be replaced. The boiler itself, the measurements that I took, I did not find any killing faults with thickness, but it's got some very serious rivet head erosion. And so that'll need to be fixed. Jeff, what did you find?
The inside is kind of fascinating. All the tubes are still in it, and there's a lot of original scale. If anybody wants to collect some original scale, I can get you some. I don't think the water in Gunnison was very good because it left a mess inside 223. The inside is interesting. It's kind of like the outside. There's some spots that look really good, and there's other spots that don't look so good. But the interior of the boiler is kind of hard to judge anything at this point because it needs a really good boiler wash. And then, of course, the tubes still need to be cut out so you can do a proper full inspection of the interior of the boiler. The boiler's in rough shape. There's no doubt about it. Like John said, the thing got sprinklered. That's one of the things that can kill a steam locomotive is just water sitting in there between when the asbestos was still on it and just held in there right up against the steel of the boiler and rotting it away from the outside in. It's one of the killers for locomotives that live in a park is how much deterioration you end up with on the outside.
So the Golden Spike group did the asbestos remediation?
I think it was done before they were involved.
It was done before it.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Sorry, Jeff, I didn't mean to cut you off.
And like John said, the frame is actually in pretty decent shape. The cylinder needs some repairs. The drivers look pretty good. The tires are still good. We think we can get away with just turning the tires like the Ren would have done.
Wow.
The few crown brasses in the driver boxes that we could see looked pretty decent. The axles don't look bad. It's pretty typical for the C-class engines to have like the number 3 driver and the number 4 driver pretty worn down because they're right there underneath the firebox. So one thing that they have to deal with all the time is cinders and ash get stuck in the cellar box and can wear out an axle a lot faster than they would on the number 1s or the number 2s. Side rods are kind of interesting. You've got the picture there. Was it one main rod or both main rods that got bent at one point in a crane lift, Jimmy?
One. As I recall, Jeff, it's the fireman's side main rod was bent at some point when they picked it up with the crane.
Yeah, and the Golden Spike chapter straightened it. We'll have to see if it needs to be stress relieved still. When Jimmy and I were looking at it last month, there was one side rod that looked like it was poorly cut out of steel with a torch, maybe towards the end of its career, that might have to get replaced. I mean, a lot of stuff that you see that have come off the locomotive doesn't look too bad. The biggest, scariest thing with the locomotive at this point is the boiler itself.
Right.
I would imagine if the Rio Grande wasn't willing to upgrade the track or the bridges on the Baldwin branch, they probably weren't willing to put a lot of effort into keeping the C16s super healthy at the time.
Yeah, their main
Yeah,
goal is to
unfortunately,
keep the thing running.
it is clear that the handwriting was on the wall for
Yeah.
these branches pretty early on. So they stopped spending money on this stuff pretty early, really, which of course for us is great. That's why it survived.
Right.
You know, one of the things that's fascinating in the industry at large is, with the exception of the UP and the 3751 and a couple other things, the big stuff all disappeared.
Yeah.
There's an amazing amount of the little stuff that got over onto branch lines where there was light rail, that
Oh,
managed to survive.
I never thought about that. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, the
So
fact
that
that
in the case
there's
of, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, that's okay. Well, just the fact that there's one single Rio Grande standard gauge locomotive left around is mind blowing.
Yeah, and it only survived because it ended up on the SLVS.
Yep.
Oh, okay, right.
Otherwise
Which
it would
is
be gone.
It would be gone.
same
Yeah.
thing, right? It
Pearl,
was on a
The
branch
classic
line.
example, yeah. The
Yeah.
L131s, all that stuff, that disappeared. And some of that stuff disappeared when it was really quite new. So one of the things that's been a big blessing for the narrow gauge and the CNTS in particular was that it was a time capsule long before the states decided to give up on it. A lot of these other things, when they gave up on them, they were mid 40s new equipment. This stuff was 1800s new equipment.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
very much so. Jimmy, I'd like to ask you about how did the C16 Locomotive Society form? How did the 223 Locomotive Society form? And what's the difference and commonality between those two organizations?
Great question. C16 Society formed from a group of guys that were sitting around in Chama one day thinking about, hey, we need to do something with these 316s. They're basically all falling apart. They're into disrepair. A couple of them needed new cabs, et cetera, et cetera. And so a group of us formed the C16 Society with the idea in mind that we would help the conservators restore these locomotives, whether it be cosmetic or back to running condition. And so we approached all three conservators about getting a C16 restored in running condition. And one of them flat turned us down, but the other two let us, that hey, that is a possibility. And so we continued our pursuit of trying to help these organizations do something with the C16. And with the 278, we pursued with the guys about hey, what can we do with this thing? Can we get this cab fixed? Get it off the bridge, get it under cover so that it can be preserved. But is there a chance for that thing to ever run again? You never say never, right? Because now that it's off the bridge and things are happening, you just never know. The 223 was probably the best candidate, just because what John mentioned earlier, the politics involved with the 68 and 78, trying to move them off property and run them around and all that kind of stuff, is not a popular idea within the museum or the, forest department. But so 223 was pursued. And I personally felt that, in our time frame and stream of time, with the knowledge of narrow gauge and the people who love it and everything, I honestly felt that this would probably be the last chance there would be for someone crazy enough to want to rebuild a C16 in this day and age. And so we started pursuing with the state of Utah and the city of Ogden about the 223 with the idea in mind of having it restored. We did not want to be conservator of a locomotive. We just wanted to help an organization. As we continued with negotiations with the city of Ogden, we found out real quick that they didn't want anything to do with it. And the current organization would have a really hard time, finishing the restoration of the engine and that type of thing. And so we thought, in order for this to proceed, we needed to establish a foundation for the locomotive itself, which was the 223 Foundation, create that foundation so that a conservator could rebuild the locomotive. And so that's how the 223 Foundation came about.
Gotcha. Okay, that's a great history. I love that. And all three of you are involved in both organizations. Is that a fair statement? Or specifically just 223? Like Jimmy, I know you're in both.
Yeah, I'm in both. John's an advisor on C16 Society.
Okay.
We there's not a lot happening with the C16 Society because of what's going on. Now that the cab's getting restored, we are providing the drawings or 3D solid model CAD drawings through the C16 Society to help restore the cab on 278, working with the two organizations that are working on that, getting that done. And then we are in communication with, perhaps when they get everything settled, how it's going to be held undercover, the new display. So we're working with them on that. But wheels of progress turn slow when you got government money involved. So it might be a long time coming, but we are in communication with them, and they update us what's happening and that type of thing. So I'm sure we'll be asked when the time comes. But right now, getting a cab on her is, something that needed to happen. So that's happening now. The cab just got delivered to Durango. And they're going to start working on that very soon. So that's nice to see that happening.
That's fantastic. Am I right in thinking that like the city of Montrose owns 278, but the Forest Service is they have it under a lease, or is that completely wrong?
John, do you got?
Well, my understanding actually is that it is still owned by the city of Montrose and is leased on some long-term basis actually to the Park Service, because isn't it the Park Service that runs Black Canyon, I believe.
Right.
And so Jimmy's exactly right that when you start getting the federal government involved, it gets complex even when everybody's pulling on the same end of the rope.
Right.
And if you get anybody not pulling on the same end of the rope, it gets even more complex.
Yeah.
So
it's probably more like pushing a rope rather than pulling it.
Yeah, right. We know how well that works.
Pushing a rope uphill.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff, what era will 223 be restored to?
It'll look just like it did in 1939 and 1940, so end of service.
Very cool. That happens to be my favorite. So
it's essentially the picture that my virtual background.
Nice.
Is that era.
Yeah. And so Jeff, what's the plans? This locomotive is going to get restored in Durango, and then please tell us what happens next.
I could, but Jimmy, do you want to field that one?
Yeah, basically what we have is we have an agreement once the locomotive meets the FRA inspection. The C6, our 223 Foundation has 10 years to basically play with it. So we can have the locomotive shipped wherever we want. We'd like to see it obviously run on the Durango and Silverton for a bit and then move to the Cumbres Toltec. It could go back. There's a possibility with the Olympics coming in Salt Lake City that the locomotive goes back for the Olympics.
Wow.
It could visit the Colorado Railroad Museum for a little bit, go back to Durango or Cumbres, whatever we decide to do with it at the time. But then at the end of the 10 years, the locomotive will be gifted to the Colorado Railroad Museum.
Okay, I knew there was a connection there. I appreciate you clarifying that. That's why I was trying to draw Jeff in, because I didn't realize that there was the 10-year. So there's a good chance we're going to see this run on any number of railroads within that 10-year period between when it's fixed, when the restoration's complete and it's gifted to the CRRM.
Of course, you got 3
Wow.
foot between the rails. We'll run it.
That's
So,
so cool. And
yeah.
and Jeff, has the museum talked at all about, I mean, I know 10 plus restoration years, we're talking a long way down the road, but has the museum talked about, like, is this an asset that they want to keep in operating condition? Maybe continue to travel with it? What has the museum had those discussions?
Yes and no. I will say, as long as I'm going to be there, we'll keep it in running condition and keep it FRA and make it something that can also travel along with RGS 20. And here in the next couple of years, 346 will be in the same boat and have the same options to be able to tour around. And who knows, maybe we could get 223 and 346 together, and 160
that'd be so
and
cool.
315.
Oh my
Talk about little
God.
kid dreams. So But to Jimmy's point, 223 is going to the Durango and Silverton to get restored. After the boiler gets its FRA certification, then the clock starts. It was 11 years. Within the 11 years after that point, then the locomotive will go to CRRM, which again will be after it's finished, after it's toured for a while. And part of the reasoning for that, so the locomotive should be restored in about 4 to 5 years, Jimmy's, once the DNS really gets started on it.
2 years.
2 years.
That's a big difference between
I'll
2
hold my
and
breath.
5. Sorry.
Yeah. But then it'll get toured around for a while, like I said. And the reason why that window needs to be so long is because I don't have anywhere to put it. The museum's roundhouse is essentially 4.5 stalls, really, because the middle stall is cut short by the viewing gallery on the inside.
Right.
The museum's roundhouse needs to grow both physically, the shop needs to be bigger, and the staffing needs to increase. Me and one other guy are going to have a hard time taking care of 4 locomotives. So the roundhouse needs to get bigger, because if I could fit 4 locomotives and nothing else,
right,
then I'd have to shove locomotives outside to bring cars in. So the roundhouse physically needs to get bigger, and that's giving us a window to hopefully work towards that goal. And that probably is a bombshell to some people, but it needs to happen.
I had heard that an expansion of the roundhouse was being talked about.
Yeah, it's in our long-term goals at the museum. Part of our strategic plan is, we are slowly acquiring properties around us, and we can't make anything better or bigger without buying the properties around us. So,
okay, I have we're starting to get close to time, and I don't want to steal your time from you more than what we've already done. So I have I think 2 additional questions. The first one is, how can we or the public at large help? Because I'm just going to say this up front. I've always wanted to see a C16 operate. It's been a dream of mine since I knew what a C16 was. It's easily my favorite steam locomotive, bar none. And so I just couldn't be more excited to hear that 223 is going to be operating in 2 or 5 years. So how can we help?
Obviously, the big elephant in the room is money. Your donations are going to help make this possible. The more the value of the donations is important as far as the time frame of getting the locomotive restored. The more money we can throw at the locomotive, the faster it can get restored. And so your support in that regard is, very important. But we also know there's a lot of rail fans, historians out there that may have artifacts that maybe even belong to 223 or another locomotive, rail grand part that could be used on the locomotive. It happened in 220 with 315. Several people came through with some of the parts that belong to 315. But we've already had a couple of people say, hey, I've got air gauges, I've got valves, I've got this and that, various parts that we can use on the locomotive. So that's something to think about. But, your unwavering support of seeing a C16 run in this day and age is very important. And so we'd like to see that happen sooner than later.
And
I don't want to see any gray hairs on Jeff when the 223 is running.
Oh, you got plenty of time. Let's not use that as a gauge, because we got plenty of time for that.
And I still want to see some hairs on me. when it's done. One of
I
the
should point
nice
out, folks-
things in this situation is that because it got pretty thoroughly taken apart, and because the DNS has done the 340 and the 41 and are doing the 346, there aren't a whole lot of surprises in terms of things that we don't know that we'll find out later. So we've already found most of the things, and that helps with creating pretty good estimate. If you'll recall, the 20 project, you know, the original thought of how much it was going to take to make it run was a small fraction of what it finally ended up costing. In this case, we're in much better shape. The other thing that's happened, quite frankly, is that the skill set has grown tremendously. You know, back when I started in this game, if a locomotive needed tubes, we sort of thought, well, that's it, it's done. And now, you know, we do things that we never dreamed we could accomplish 40 years ago, 45 years ago.
Yeah, utilizing current technology in industrial applications is really helping the restoration effort of steam locomotives worldwide. And we're going to be able to utilize that on the 223. For example, the wishbone pipes that John talked about earlier, they will get 3D scanned and printed as lost wax parts to make the casting. So, I mean, we're going to use everything that we can possible to make this happen.
Real
That's
quick.
fantastic. Please.
How can people help? Go to 223locomotivefoundation.org. Follow us and donate. You can donate right on the website. I've done it. Several other folks have done it, and it's the best way that they can support us. You can also contact us through the website. Myself, Jimmy, and Ray, who's our other partner. There it is right there. That's the best way to help us out.
Excellent. That's fantastic. Okay. Last question is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you want to talk about? Did we not cover something that you want to make sure that people know about?
We're going to have fun with it. And if people didn't know, the reason why we'll be able to travel anywhere is that it's going to be converted to burn oil, which is, get over it, folks who don't like it. This is the modern time where it's the fuel of the future that will allow locomotives to travel anywhere, anytime, regardless of, you know, for the most part, fire conditions. World's not getting any colder.
That it could go to Georgetown if it was ever invited.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Well, in the Durango and Silverton, unless it's the dead of winter, which 20 really, that worked out perfectly. I had so much fun behind 20. That's a whole nother story. But it's very rare for a coal burning locomotive to operate on the DNS right now. Very rare.
Right.
We had a quick question. Did anybody else have anything else they wanted to? No. Okay. Don't want to miss anybody. Somebody had a question in the chat. Do the C16s have any blind drivers?
Yes.
The two centered ones are blind. Yes.
Okay.
2s and 3s are both blind.
Cool. I didn't know that. All right. John, Jeff, Jimmy, I've had the pleasure of chatting with all of you in person. I think you're pretty incredible people, and the thing that what you are doing here just fills me with joy. It makes me so damn happy. I really want to see a C16 operate. It's going to be fantastic.
So do we.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting us, and we look forward
Thanks
to
for the opportunity. Yes.
future updates.
Absolutely. Good. Well, that's it. We'll be back on the 4th Thursday of May, which is during D session, and I think we're going to present from Chama. Should be a lot of fun. Thanks again, John, Jimmy, Jeff. You guys are fantastic. I can't thank you enough for your time, and I know you're all extremely busy people, so I'm very grateful for the time that you gave, and thanks everybody for watching. I hope you all have a good May and June. We'll talk soon.
All right.
Thanks
Thank you.
for the opportunity.
Have a good
Bye.
night.